Hi, my name is Aleksandr Nechaev, and I am a founder at Dorfer Games. Today, I want to talk about the most important points for a game studio when working with the publishers. And talking about the Dorfer Games, we are more than 2 years in the market. We have a team of 30 plus team members, as well as we have published a few games with a total of 10 million installs. And why we decided to make a presentation, it's just because we have tested with a lot of publishers, almost all in the market. We work together with a lot of publishers. So we see different pipelines and we want to, in general, to make more hits together. So we want to increase the potential number of hits for a publisher to find and to help to attract more promising teams. So that's why we decided to make a presentation. In general, the presentation is divided into 5 parts, which usually studio comes with the publisher. It's initial contact, it's a first project, it's a long-term collaboration, publishing hits, and agreement termination. So I will share the tips about each step. So let's start from the initial studio contact. First of all, it's nice for publishers and for studio as well to discuss a pipeline, to know the ATA of the publisher, to know what are the features you need to have in the build and what is the testing pipeline. Because, for example, for some publishers, you need to have a well-polished build with a lot of things in the build, or for some publishers, you just need to reach a low CPI, and only after that you can go to the iteration. So, for example, from our experience with one publisher, we tested games with for a couple of months, and when we have a promising metrics, but the CPI was about 50 cents. And then we just learned that we need to decrease the CPI until 30 cents to be able to iterate the game. And that's why probably we could possibly save about 1 or 2 weeks before on each idle arcade prototype and to speed up the development. So from the publisher side, it's better if you can share the estimations and what you want to see in the build, because it will help studio to focus on the right things. Talking about the terms of the agreement, sometimes higher paper prototype is more important than the revenue share. Surely there are some studios who work and who are trying to increase the number of prototypes and just earn on the paper prototype model, but I'm not talking about them, because to be honest, in the current market conditions, it's almost impossible to earn from the paper prototype. But I'm talking about that if the publisher can increase the PPP, it means that the studio have more cash flow to improve the game development. It means that they probably can hire a middle game developer, for example, instead of junior developer, or attract a new game designer to improve the game. So probably for several studios, it's better if you can have a better PPP comparing to their share, and probably to have lesser share for them. Also, don't forget to set realistic expectations. I mean, usually when we discuss the agreement from the publisher side, you can have a feedback like some of the publishers are ready to work from the very beginning and to sign a long-term contract for 6 or 12 months. Some of the publishers are ready to test only a few prototypes, and if you haven't hit the good metrics, they will terminate the agreement. The both situations are okay, but on a publisher side, please don't say that you're going to work like for a year and you're ready to test a lot of and dozens of prototypes and then terminate the agreement after one game, because it helps the developer to focus on the right things. And please just share the realistic expectations, even if you're ready to test only one game. Oh, okay. Talking about the payment, and from the publisher side, there are both two options. It's a pay testing and free testing, or all games testing. To be honest, I would suggest for a publisher, probably if you can, to test at least 1 or 2 games on a paid basis, because you want to see a good quality from the studio. and usually the studio need to spend a lot of time and money to build a high quality prototype. And if you're asking for a free prototype, probably you will not receive the quality you want. And if you can, I would suggest to have at least one paid prototype. But if you want free testing, probably it's a good idea to share what are your next steps and what is the contract terms which you will be ready to sign after the first build. Also, don't forget to share the expectations, what you want to see in the build. Do you want to receive a small CPI, or do you want to check an art quality, or do you want to check the speed of development? Because based on these expectations, the studio can improve and create a better game. Talking about the payment, cash flow is also is important things for studio, and there is an opportunity or an advantage for smaller publishers who are pretty flexible on the payment. Some of the publishers are ready to pay just after the game is published to the store, or even to have some prepayment model on PPP. So these points also increase the cash flow, and it also depends and helps the studio to have a better quality games at the moment, and not to wait like for 1 or 2 months to receive the payment and only then to do something with that. Okay, I guess it's not working. Okay, the next step is first project. Yep, let's move to the next slide. And the important point is the ideas approval. And there is no shortcut, but I would say that probably it's the best idea to approve ideas or skip them as soon as possible. And the bad idea is to provide an unclear on chaotic feedback, because, for example, with the one publisher, we have an acceptance rate about 60% of our ideas, and about 50% goes into the iterations. And with the publisher B, we had the approval rate of 10%, and we hadn't got any potentially good metrics with that. So I would say that the ideas approval is important. The ideation is also crucial, but it not depends on the number of ideas. So please, if you want to improve the ideas, please share the feedback and share the insights and data that you can use. The next slide. Talking about the studio updates, we are trying to share as many updates as we can with the publishers. But from one publisher, we receive negative feedback because they thought that the build is final, even though we shared that it's not the final build, and we shared what we want to receive, where we want to receive the feedback. So after a few negative feedbacks from this publisher, we decided to share only pre-approval builds. So if a studio shares some updates with you, just encourage them to keep posting and keep updating. Talking about the approval stage, to be honest, from the publisher side, there are usually three things worth mentioning. It's sudden additional feedback when we are sharing the final build out of the fixes, and there are like, I don't know, 10 points to fix, and all this feedback could be possibly shared earlier. It's involving new people who, like game designers on the last stage. For example, with one publisher, the build was approved, the test builds were approved by a publishing manager, but the game designer needs to approve the final build. And in this case, we usually spend about a week to improve the build according to a game designer feedback. So I would say if you want to attract a game designer, probably it's better to connect him as soon as possible, or just attract him on the iteration phase. And the third thing is excessive polishing, because sometimes you want to publish the build to the store and the test metrics, and sometimes there is like unnecessary feedback, like let's move the icon 5 pixel up. So we also love polish the builds, but if it's a long approval, it's better to move later, because to be honest, we with the one publisher we have a few points on the feedback usually, and the metrics are good, and we have a published game. And at the same time, we had a publisher with all of these 3 points, and we haven't published anything. And to be honest, the metrics were not so good. So from my side, I guess the approval stage can be faster and better, and these problems can be fixed. So it's better to share the feedback as fast as you can. And let's move to the long-term cooperation. If I would share only one tip which can be useful for all publisher, and what is the most crucial one, I would say it's regular calls. So if you're a publisher, ideally set up a call with the team once in a week, for example, for 30 or 60 minutes, because from our experience, the team is pretty motivated. They're trying as best that they can to prepare the updates, to share the art style, to share the videos and builds. And it also, it's convenient to discuss small details. So from our experience, we see that it helps the team to move faster and to have better games. When I was preparing the presentation, I've talked also with a few studios, and this is the problem a lot of studios are having. It's a lack of attention. For example, the situation on the screen is from our experience, and we were waiting for 3 weeks to receive the feedback for the iteration when so here, for example, with these metrics, we could possibly go to iteration or monetization phase and to launch as soon as possible. And unfortunately, with these metrics, we were not been able to publish the game because the feedback was slow. And to be honest, so it all depends on the attention. I know that some publishers have a lot of teams for one publishing manager, but just take into mind that there are a few things and a few teams share this feedback with me. So it's a huge problem that probably can be fixed. And again, about the feedback, because it also can be improved with the publishers. For example, just prioritize the important features, because in this case, the team will be able to fix the important issues first and then move to or to have and backlog some unimportant features. Also, don't forget to share insights from the similar projects, because for example, for one project, we were able to decrease the CPI from $1 to 40 cents, and to increase the retention based on the data from other publisher projects. So if you can, just share the creatives with the good metrics, which can be helpful for a product. And sure, don't forget to share the clear feedback, because sometimes it's not so easy to understand. Don't share the feedback like, I don't like the core loop, let's do something else. But better to share the feedback is, let's check the project A and choose the core mechanic from there, and let's check the project B, let's say, and use merge mechanic from there, and let's mix up. And a bit more about the feedback. It's better if you can be flexible on the feedback which you share, because from the studio side, the game designer can have a lack of interest if the publisher is too strict on the feedback and on the vision, because if the game designer have no opportunity to improve or to share to implement his vision, it's usually not so interesting to do. So just be flexible in this case. If you can provide the feedback fast enough, usually it's during the day, but warn if it's late, so the studio can iterate and move faster to have projects where project updates and implement them. and don't split it into several parts. So if you can share all the feedback at once, better to do it, because otherwise the team doesn't understand, then the feedback will end. And for like it sounds like an endless feedback, and the team also can be demotivated. And also don't forget to share positive feedback with the studio, because usually it's not a hard thing to do, but from my experience, the feedback from the publisher side is more encouraging for the game designers, artists, and developers comparing, for example, to founder feedback. So please share if you like the quality, the speed of development, or the art style. And talking about the launching games, here are a few things that can be helpful. At first, if you can share the strategy and what are you going to do with the game. For example, do you plan to aggressively scale it and go to the top charts? Let's say it's better if you can share these plans, because in this case, the studio can improve the pipeline and, for example, to focus only on the monetization things and, for example, don't do any major updates until the game will scale. At the same time, the game studio can focus on making more creatives or preparing the A/B tests if the game should be aggressively scaling, because in this case, yeah, it will help to make more money for studio and the publisher. And the same thing with the marketing plan and insights. For example, usually the publisher have a great dashboards with the criteria, CPIs, etc., etc. You can see all the metrics for the first tests, but to be honest, it's not so clear to see how the game is performing in terms of creatives, for example, or something like that. So usually we prepare 10 creatives, and we didn't get enough data to understand what's better and what's not. So please, if you can, share the marketing plans and sites, and it will help the studio to improve the pipeline and to make more money from the game. And again, talking about the launching hits, usually the developers are working hard. It can be like 10, 12 hours per day, even on weekend. So don't forget to share the feedback and support the team, because it's usually costs to the publisher nothing, but it really empowers the team. And the last part, it's agreement termination. Yeah, let's move to it. So I would say it's pretty clear things to do, but from our experience, we had a similar situation a few months ago. So I decided to add these things to slide for publisher to understand what's better. So let's say if you share the feedback with the studio, what you don't like about the game, so about the quality, about the art, and they can improve it, it's nice. If you can notify the studio about the termination like 2 or 4 weeks in advance, it's also good. It's okay. And if you can pay on time or even earlier for the latest projects, for final project, it's also good. But please, in terms of the cooperation, it's not the best option to finish the cooperation when the builds are not ready, or terminate the contract one day, or backdate it, or even with hold the payment for the work done, and yeah, and share the updates before that everything is good, but then stop the cooperation, because in this case it will affect the reputation in a bad way. So it's better to pay a few thousand K, for example, compared to the risks. So yeah, I think it's basic rules, but it will help to avoid some unnecessary situations. And to summarize, to be honest, the most important things are to have a shared values, and to share the same values, and be clear, to have a clarity, honesty. And for us, for example, in a long-term basis, the better, the best performing partnerships is there. We share the same values when we want the publisher to make the best games possible. So yeah, I would say there are a lot of things you can improve, but the basic one is just to do as you can and to be friendly, open-minded, etc., etc. And if you want to receive the presentation or just talk to me, chat about the game dev, you can scan the QR code and write to me. Thank you.